The gunshot echoed through the valley as Grace Callaway steadied her father's rifle against her shoulder. The resounding crack sending a flock of startled birds into the cloudless Montana sky. At 18, she had developed a reputation in Silver Creek for being the finest shot in the county, much to the dismay of her father, who considered such skills unbecoming for a young lady of marriageable age. Grace Elizabeth Callaway, what in heaven's name do you think you're doing? Harold Callaway's voice thundered across the yard, his imposing figure casting a long shadow as he stormed toward his daughter. Grace lowered the rifle, her chin lifting defiantly as she faced her father. "Just some target practice, father. William showed me how." William Ellsworth again. Harold's face flushed with anger, his jaw clenching beneath his meticulously groomed beard. "I've told you 100 times to stay away from that no-account cowboy." It was the autumn of 1875, and Silver Creek, Montana, was a town caught between the old frontier ways and the promise of progress. The Callaway Ranch stood as one of the most prosperous in the territory, a status Harold guarded with the same fierce determination with which he guarded his only daughter. "William is not no account," Grace countered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "He works harder than any man on your ranch. You just refuse to see it." Harold snatched the rifle from her hands, his expression thunderous. "I see plenty, girl. I see a penniless cowhand with nothing to offer but sweet words and empty promises. I see my daughter throwing away her future on a man who will never amount to anything." Grace's hands balled into fists at her sides, her pale blue dress fluttering in the autumn breeze. "That's not fair. William has plans, ambitions." Harold laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the crisp air. "What ambitions could a man like that possibly have? He's been drifting from ranch to ranch since he was 16. "He's saving to buy his own land," Grace insisted. "He has dreams, father, dreams bigger than this valley." Harold's expression softened marginally as he looked at his daughter so much like her mother, with the same honey-gold hair and fierce spirit. Margaret had been gone 5 years now, leaving him alone to raise their headstrong daughter. "Dreams don't put food on the table, Grace," he said, his voice gentler now. "Dreams don't build a future. I want more for you than a life of hardship with a man who can't provide." Grace's reply was cut short by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Both turned to see William Ellsworth riding toward the house, his tall figure straight in the saddle, dark hair tousled by the wind. At 23, William had the lean, weathered look of a man who had lived his life under the open sky, his hands calloused from honest work. Harold's expression darkened immediately. "Get inside, Grace." "No," she refused, standing her ground. "I won't be ordered about like a child." William dismounted with fluid grace, his eyes finding hers immediately. The look that passed between them spoke of a connection that had grown steadily over the 2 years since he'd first arrived at the Callaway Ranch. "Afternoon, Mr. Callaway," William said respectfully, removing his hat. "Miss Grace." Harold stepped between them, his broad shoulders blocking Grace from William's view. "You're supposed to be mending the north fence, Ellsworth. What business do you have riding up to my house in the middle of the day?" William stood tall, his gaze unwavering. "Finished the north section, sir." "Came to report a break in the west fence line. Looks like someone's been cutting your wire." Harold's eyes narrowed. "Thompson's men, no doubt. That man's been trying to push his cattle onto my grazing land for months." He glanced back at Grace. "Get inside now. I need to speak with Ellsworth alone." This time, Grace complied, but not before exchanging another look with William. It was brief, but laden with promise, a silent vow that no matter what her father said, what they shared wouldn't be so easily dismissed. Inside the house, Grace paced the parlor, the elegant furnishings a testament to her father's wealth. She moved to the window, watching as Harold gesticulated angrily while William stood his ground, his posture respectful but unyielding. Martha, the housekeeper who had helped raise Grace after her mother's death, entered the room with a tray of tea. "You're going to wear a hole in that carpet, Miss Grace," she observed with a knowing look. "Father is impossible," Grace said, accepting the cup Martha offered. "He refuses to see William as anything but a drifter." Martha's weathered face creased with sympathy. "Your father wants security for you, child. Can't fault him for that." "But he doesn't understand," Grace insisted. "William isn't like the other ranch hands. He's educated, he reads Shakespeare and can quote Whitman from memory. He has plans, Martha." "Plans don't much matter to your father," Martha said gently. "Not when William doesn't have 2 pennies to rub together." Grace turned back to the window in time to see her father storming toward the house, while William mounted his horse and rode toward the bunkhouse. The set of William's shoulders told her everything she needed to know. The conversation had not gone well. Harold burst through the front door moments later, his face flushed with anger. "That boy had the audacity to ask for your hand," he announced without preamble. "As if I would ever allow my daughter to marry a man with nothing to his name but the horse he rides and the clothes on his back." Grace's heart leaped. William had asked for her hand. Despite his caution about approaching her father too soon, he had taken that step. "What did you say to him?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Harold poured himself a generous glass of whiskey from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. "I told him what any sensible father would tell a fortune-hunting cowboy. I told him to forget about you and focus on earning his keep while he still has employment on my ranch." "Fortune hunting?" Grace echoed incredulously. "Is that truly what you think of him?" "What else am I to think?" Harold countered. "A man in his position pursuing the daughter of the wealthiest rancher in the county. It's as transparent as glass." "You're wrong about him," Grace insisted, her voice rising. "William loves me for who I am, not for my father's money." Harold set down his glass with deliberate care. "You're young, Grace. Too young to recognize when a man is using pretty words to advance himself." "I'm 18, Father, old enough to know my own heart." "Old enough to be fooled by the first handsome face that pays you attention," Harold corrected. "William Ellsworth is not the man for you. In time, you'll thank me for protecting you from making a terrible mistake." Grace felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. "You can't control my heart, Father. No matter how much you disapprove, I love William, and he loves me." Harold's expression hardened. "Love won't keep you warm at night when the winter comes and there's no food on the table. I've made my decision, Grace. William Ellsworth is not to set foot near this house again. He'll finish out the month and then he's to move on." "You're firing him," Grace gasped, "because he dared to love your daughter." "I'm firing him because he overstepped his bounds," Harold corrected. "And because as long as he remains on this ranch, you'll continue this foolish infatuation." Grace turned away, unable to bear the finality in her father's voice. "This isn't an infatuation. What William and I share is real. Real or not, it ends now," Harold said firmly. "I've already sent word to your aunt in Boston. You'll be leaving at the end of the week to spend the winter with her. By spring, you'll have forgotten all about William Ellsworth." Grace whirled around, shock rendering her momentarily speechless. "Boston? You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," Harold replied, his tone brooking no argument. "You'll attend the proper social functions, meet suitable young men from good families. Perhaps you'll even find a husband worthy of you." "I won't go," Grace declared, her voice shaking with emotion. "You can't force me to leave." Harold's expression was implacable. "You're my daughter, and until you marry, you'll obey my wishes. Your tickets have already been purchased. Martha will help you pack." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Grace standing alone, her world crumbling around her. That night, as a full moon rose over the mountains, Grace slipped from the house, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders against the autumn chill. The path to the bunkhouse was familiar, one she had traveled many times in secret over the past year. William was waiting for her by the old oak tree, their usual meeting place. His face, silvered by moonlight, was grave. "Your father made his feelings quite clear today," he said as she approached. Opening his arms to her, Grace stepped into his embrace, breathing in the scent of his saddle leather, pine, and the faint trace of soap. "He's sending me to Boston," she whispered against his chest. "And he's dismissed you from the ranch." William's arms tightened around her. "I expected as much. Your father's never made any secret of his disdain for me." "What are we going to do?" Grace pulled back to look up at him, her eyes searching his face. "I won't go to Boston, William. I won't let him separate us." William cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Listen to me, Grace. I don't have much to offer you right now, but I have a plan." "We could leave together," Grace suggested desperately. "Tonight, just ride out and never look back." William shook his head. "And go where? Live how? I won't take you from comfort to poverty. You deserve better than that." "I don't care about comfort," Grace insisted. "I care about you." "I know," William said, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "But I care about giving you the life you deserve. I've heard talk of gold in the Black Hills. Others have struck it rich there." Grace's heart clenched with fear. "The Black Hills? But that's Dakota territory, that's Sioux land. It's dangerous, William." "It's an opportunity," he countered. 6 months, maybe a year of hard work, and I could come back with enough to buy our own land. To offer you a real future, one your father couldn't object to." "A year," Grace repeated, the prospect of such a separation almost unimaginable. "I can't bear to be apart from you for a year." William pressed his forehead to hers. "It won't be easy for me either. But think about it, Grace. If I come back a wealthy man, your father would have no grounds to refuse us. We could build a life together on our terms." Grace closed her eyes, torn between the desire to flee with him now and the knowledge that he was right. Her father would hunt them down if they eloped, use his influence to make life impossible for them. "Promise me you'll come back," she whispered. "No matter what happens, promise you'll return for me." William's kiss was tender, a seal on his vow. "Nothing in this world could keep me from coming back to you. I swear it on my life." They stood together under the oak tree, planning in hushed voices. William would leave before dawn, heading north to the gold fields. Grace would go to Boston as her father demanded, but only to buy William time to make his fortune. "Take this," William said, pressing something into her palm. Grace looked down to see a simple silver ring with a small turquoise stone. "William, I can't. It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing of value I have. Keep it safe for me. When I return, I'll replace it with one worthy of you." Grace slipped the ring onto her finger, then removed the delicate gold locket from around her neck. Inside was a miniature portrait of her, painted on her 18th birthday. "So you don't forget my face," she said, placing it in his hand. William tucked the locket carefully into his shirt pocket, next to his heart. "As if I could ever forget a single detail about you." Their goodbye was bittersweet, filled with promises and plans for a future that seemed both tantalizingly close and impossibly distant. "1 year," William whispered against her lips as they parted. "Wait for me for 1 year. If I haven't returned by then with enough to claim you properly, I'll come back anyway, and we'll face your father together." Grace nodded, memorizing the feel of his hands, the sound of his voice, the warmth of his embrace. "I'll wait. "However long it takes, William, I'll wait." As dawn approached, they separated with one final kiss. Grace watched from the shadows of the oak tree as William disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, taking her heart with him. 2 days later, she boarded the eastbound train to Boston, her father standing proud on the platform, believing he had successfully removed the obstacle to his daughter's suitable marriage. He couldn't see the silver ring with its turquoise stone, which Grace wore on a chain beneath her high-collared traveling dress, nor could he hear the silent promise she repeated with every beat of her heart: "I will wait. I will wait. I will wait." Boston, in the winter of 1875, was a city of stark contrasts, opulent brownstone mansions standing alongside tenements crowded with immigrant families, elegant ladies in furs passing laborers bundled against the biting cold. For Grace, accustomed to the wide open spaces of Montana, the city was both fascinating and suffocating. Aunt Josephine's home in Beacon Hill was everything the Callaway ranch was not: formal, rigid, and bound by social conventions that seemed designed specifically to stifle Grace's independent spirit. From morning until night, her days were structured around proper activities for a young lady: needlepoint, piano practice, French lessons, and carefully chaperoned social calls. "Posture, Grace," Aunt Josephine would remind her constantly, tapping her niece's shoulder with a folded fan. "And do try to speak more softly. A lady's voice should never carry across a room." Grace endured it all with outward compliance and inward rebellion, her thoughts constantly drifting westward to William. Each night, alone in her elegant bedchamber, she would take out his ring and hold it to her heart, wondering where he was, if he was safe, if he was thinking of her as she was thinking of him. Letters from Silver Creek were infrequent and heavily censored. Her father wrote of ranch business and local gossip, carefully omitting any mention of William. Martha's letters were warmer, but equally vague about the young man who had captured Grace's heart. It was as though William Ellsworth had been erased from existence. Despite her aunt's best efforts, Grace resisted all romantic entanglements. There was no shortage of eligible young men in Boston society eager to court the beautiful, if somewhat unconventional, Western heiress. Yet none could hold her interest, not when her heart was buried somewhere in the distant Black Hills. "You're being terribly foolish," Aunt Josephine scolded after Grace had politely but firmly declined an invitation to dinner from the son of a prominent banker. "Charles Pembroke is an excellent match, Harvard-educated, from one of the oldest families in Massachusetts, and quite taken with you. I'm sure Mr. Pembroke will find someone more appreciative of his credentials," Grace replied, turning back to the book in her lap, a volume of Whitman's Leaves of Grass that reminded her of the poetry William used to recite to her under the stars. Josephine sighed dramatically. "Your father warned me about your stubborn streak. He seems to think you're pining for some cowhand from back home." Grace looked up sharply. "Did he mention William by name?" "So there is a young man," Josephine said, her expression triumphant. "I suspected as much." "Really, Grace, you must put such youthful fancies behind you. A ranch hand is hardly suitable husband material for a woman of your standing." "You know nothing about him," Grace said, closing her book with deliberate care. "I know enough," Josephine countered. "Your father has written to me extensively about the situation. This William person had nothing to offer you but empty promises and a life of hardship." Grace stood, no longer able to maintain the facade of docile compliance. "William Ellsworth is twice the man of any of these Boston dandies you've been parading before me. He's honest, hardworking, intelligent, and penniless," Josephine finished for her. "My dear girl, romance is all well and good in novels, But in the real world, marriages must be practical arrangements. Your mother understood this. Don't speak of my mother, Grace warned, her voice low. She married my father when he was nothing but a determined young man with dreams of building a cattle empire. She believed in him when no one else would. Josephine's expression softened slightly. And look at the life she led, isolated on a frontier ranch, far from civilization, dying far too young. She died of fever, Grace said. That could have happened anywhere, and she was happy with my father with the life they built together. Perhaps, Josephine conceded. But your father wants better for you. As do I. Grace turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the snow-covered garden. I appreciate your concern, Aunt Josephine, but my heart is not available for negotiation. I made a promise and I intend to keep it. As winter gave way to spring and spring blossomed into summer, Grace's resolve remained unshaken. The letters from Montana continued their conspicuous silence about William, and no word came from the man himself. Yet Grace clung to hope, counting down the days to the one-year mark they had agreed upon. In August, a telegram arrived from her father, announcing his intention to visit Boston on business. Grace received the news with mixed emotions. Despite their differences, she had missed her father terribly. Yet she knew his arrival would likely bring renewed pressure to abandon her wait for William and embrace a future more aligned with Harold Callaway's ambitions for his daughter. Harold arrived in a flurry of Western exuberance that seemed out of place amid Boston's staid elegance. He embraced his daughter warmly, then held her at arm's length to study her. "You look well, Grace," he said approvingly. "City life agrees with you." "It's good to see you, Father," Grace replied, genuinely glad despite her wariness. "How fares the ranch?" Over dinner in Aunt Josephine's formal dining room, Harold regaled them with tales of ranch life, the spring calving, the summer roundup, the ongoing disputes with neighboring ranchers. Grace listened intently, hungry for news of home, but Harold carefully avoided any mention of the one person she most wanted to hear about. Finally, when Josephine excused herself to instruct the cook about breakfast arrangements, Grace seized her opportunity. "Have you had any word of William?" she asked directly, unwilling to play games. Harold's expression darkened immediately. "I had hoped your time in Boston would have cured you of that infatuation." "It's not an infatuation, Father," Grace said steadily. "I love him. That hasn't changed, nor will it." Harold set down his wine glass with a sharp click against the polished table. "William Ellsworth is gone, Grace. He left Silver Creek nearly a year ago." "I know that," Grace said. "He went north to the Black Hills." Harold's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You spoke with him before he left?" "Against my explicit instructions. We said goodbye," Grace confirmed, her chin lifting in defiance, "and made promises to each other." Harold sighed heavily. "Promises he had no right to make. Grace, you must face facts. No one has heard from Ellsworth since he left. Not a letter, not a word. Men disappear in the gold fields all the time, claim jumpers, disease, accidents in the mines. If he were alive, surely he would have contacted you by now." Grace's heart clenched painfully, but she refused to believe the worst. "He said it might take a year. It hasn't been a full year yet." "And how long will you wait?" Harold demanded. "Another year, 5 years. Will you waste your youth pining for a ghost? He's not dead," Grace insisted, though doubt had begun to creep into her heart during the long months of silence. "I would know if he were. I would feel it." Harold reached across the table to take his daughter's hand. "I don't say these things to hurt you, Grace. I say them because I love you and I want you to be happy. It's time to let go of William Ellsworth and embrace the opportunities before you." Grace withdrew her hand. "I made a promise, Father. 1 year. It hasn't yet been a year." Harold's expression hardened. Very well. Cling to your fantasy if you must, but I won't stand by and watch you throw away your future on a man who clearly has forgotten you. I've extended our stay in Boston through the winter. Josephine tells me you've received several offers of courtship that you've summarily rejected. I'm not interested in courtship, Grace said flatly. Nevertheless, you will give these gentlemen a fair hearing, Harold insisted. Charles Pembroke, in particular, comes highly recommended. His father and I have business interests in common. Grace recognized the implacable tone in her father's voice. It was the same tone he had used when informing her she would be sent to Boston. Arguing further would only entrench his position. I'll be civil, she conceded. But I make no promises beyond that. Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. Civil is a start. In time, perhaps you'll see the wisdom of looking forward rather than backward. As autumn painted Boston's trees in crimson and gold, Grace maintained her polite but distant stance toward her suitors, Charles Pembroke chief among them. He was handsome in a conventional way, with impeccable manners and a Harvard education he mentioned at every opportunity. Yet Grace found herself unmoved by his attentions, her heart still firmly in the possession of a cowboy somewhere in the distant West. The 1-year anniversary of William's departure came and went with no word. Though Grace maintained a brave face in public, privately, doubt began to gnaw at her resolve. What if her father was right? What if William had met with misfortune in the dangerous gold fields? Or worse, what if he had simply forgotten his promises to her, seduced by newfound wealth or opportunities? No, she told herself firmly. William had given his word, and if there was one thing she knew about William Ellsworth, it was that his word was his bond. As winter descended once more on Boston, blanketing the city in snow and ice, Grace found her father's patience wearing thin. He had extended their stay in Boston far longer than his business required, clearly hoping Grace would finally relent and accept one of her suitors. "Charles has asked for my permission to court you formally," Harold announced one evening as they sat in Josephine's parlor. "I've given it." Grace looked up from her needlework. "Without consulting me. It's merely permission to court, not a betrothal," Harold pointed out. "Though I dare say a betrothal would follow quickly enough if you gave the poor man any encouragement." "I've been civil, as I promised," Grace said, "but I've given him no reason to believe my feelings might develop further." Harold's patience finally snapped. "Enough, Grace. It's been well over a year since Ellsworth disappeared. He's not coming back. If he were alive, if he cared for you as you believe, he would have sent word." "Perhaps his letters were intercepted," Grace suggested, voicing a suspicion that had grown over the months of silence. Harold's expression confirmed her fears before he could deny it. "You've been keeping his letters from me," she accused, rising to her feet. "How could you?" "There have been no letters," Harold insisted, but a flicker of guilt crossed his face. "You're lying," Grace said, her voice shaking with anger. "All this time I've been waiting, wondering while you've been hiding the truth from me. Did he write? Did he find gold in the Black Hills? Is he coming back for me?" Harold stood as well, his imposing figure no longer intimidating to Grace. "This obsession has gone on long enough. Yes, there was one letter shortly after we arrived in Boston. I intercepted it before Josephine could give it to you." "Where is it?" Grace demanded. "I have a right to know what he said." "I burned it," Harold admitted without remorse. "It contained nothing but more empty promises, more talk of striking it rich and coming to claim you. Foolish dreams, Grace. Nothing more." Grace felt as though she'd been struck. "He wrote to me." "He remembered his promise. He's alive." "Or was a year ago," Harold pointed out cruelly. "Much can happen in a year, especially to a man chasing fool's gold in the wilderness." "I want to go home," Grace said suddenly. "Back to Silver Creek." Harold shook his head. There's nothing for you there but memories of a man who's likely long gone. Your future is here, Grace, with a man like Charles who can provide the life you deserve. The life I deserve is one I choose for myself, Grace countered. Not one you arrange for me based on your notions of what's suitable. You're still my daughter, Harold reminded her. Until you marry, you remain under my protection and guidance. Grace lifted her chin, a new resolve hardening within her. Then perhaps it's time I married. Harold's expression brightened momentarily. Finally, you're being sensible. I'll speak to Charles tomorrow, not Charles, Grace interrupted. William. If he's alive, if he wrote to me as you admit, then I intend to find him, with or without your blessing. Harold's face flushed with anger. This is madness. You would throw away everything: security, position, comfort for a man who may well be dead in a ditch somewhere. For the man I love, Grace corrected. Yes, I would, just as Mother did for you. The comparison struck Harold like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older and more vulnerable than Grace had ever seen him. Your mother never had to choose, he said quietly. Her father approved of me despite my modest beginnings. Because he saw your potential, Grace pressed her advantage. Just as I see Williams. He's a good man, Father. Hardworking, honest, determined, all the qualities you value. Harold was silent for a long moment. You truly love him that much, enough to risk everything? I do, Grace said simply. Harold sighed deeply. You're so like your mother, stubborn to your core. He reached into his inside pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. There was another letter. It arrived at the ranch just before I left for Boston. I brought it with me, though I hadn't decided whether to give it to you. Grace's heart leaped as she recognized the handwriting on the envelope. With trembling fingers, she took it from her father, breaking the seal and unfolding the single page within. My dearest Grace, if this reaches you, know that I have not forgotten my promise. The gold fields proved more challenging than I anticipated, but fortune has finally smiled upon me. My claim has yielded enough to secure our future, though the process of converting ore to funds has delayed my return. I write now from Denver, where I am concluding business arrangements. By the time you receive this, I will be on my way to Boston to find you. Your father wrote that you remain there with your aunt, though he made it clear my attentions are still unwelcome. I no longer come to you as the penniless cowboy your father dismissed. I return with the means to offer you the life you deserve, and to look Harold Callaway in the eye as his equal. Wait for me just a little longer, my love. I am coming for you. Yours eternally, William. Grace looked up from the letter, tears streaming down her face. He's coming here, to Boston. Harold nodded grimly. So it would seem. When did this letter arrive at the ranch? Grace demanded, quickly calculating the potential timeline based on the letter's date. Nearly a month ago, Harold admitted. Grace's mind raced. If he left Denver when he wrote this, he could be in Boston already. He could be searching for me right now, not knowing where to find me. Harold watched his daughter's face, seeing the hope and love that illuminated her features. Something shifted within him, a recognition, perhaps, of a love that mirrored what he had once shared with Grace's mother. Your aunt's address is not difficult to discover, he said finally. If Ellsworth is as determined as his letter suggests, he will find you. As if summoned by his words, the sound of the front door knocker echoed through the house. Grace froze, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain her father must hear it. Moments later, Josephine's maid appeared in the doorway. Begging your pardon, Mr. Callaway, Miss Callaway. There's a gentleman at the door asking for Miss Grace, a Mr. Ellsworth. Grace's world narrowed to those simple words. He was here. After more than a year of separation, of doubt and waiting and hope, William had found her, Harold rose slowly from his chair, his expression unreadable. "Show him in, Mary." The maid bobbed a curtsy and disappeared, leaving Grace standing in the center of the parlor, the letter clutched in her trembling hands, her father a silent, imposing presence beside her. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and then William Ellsworth stood in the doorway. He was thinner than Grace remembered, his face more weathered, but his eyes, those clear, honest eyes that had captured her heart from the first, were unchanged as they found hers across the room. "Grace," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. She moved toward him as if in a dream, stopping only when her father's voice broke the spell. "Ellsworth," Harold acknowledged, his tone neutral. "You're a long way from Montana." William straightened, meeting the older man's gaze directly. "I go where my heart leads me, sir." "It led me here to Grace." "So your letter indicated," Harold replied. "You mentioned a change in your circumstances." William nodded, his gaze never leaving Grace's face. "My claim in the Black Hills proved more valuable than I dared hope. I've established a banking account in Denver with funds sufficient to purchase prime ranch land and the cattle to stock it." "A gold strike," Harold said skeptically. "Many such strikes prove illusory." "Not this one," William countered. "I've sold my claim to a mining company for a sum that would surprise you, Mr. Callaway. I no longer come to you as a hired hand, but as a man of means." Grace finally found her voice. "You came back," she whispered. "You kept your promise." William's expression softened as he looked at her. "Did you ever doubt I would?" "Never," Grace said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. The long months of silence had tested even her steadfast faith. Harold cleared his throat. "I understand you wish to court my daughter." William shook his head. "With all due respect, Mr. Callaway, I've moved beyond courtship. I've come to ask for Grace's hand in marriage as I did once before." "And if I refuse again?" Harold challenged. William's gaze was steady. "Then I will respect your authority as her father, but I will not give up. I'll build my ranch, establish myself further, and return next year to ask again. And the year after that, if necessary." Grace stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. "It won't be necessary. I'm of age now, father. While I would prefer your blessing, my answer to William will be yes, with or without it." Harold looked between them, seeing the unwavering love and determination in both their faces. In William's eyes, he recognized something he hadn't allowed himself to see before: the same steady resolve, the same ambition that had driven Harold himself as a young man. "You truly love my daughter?" he asked finally. "More than my own life," William replied without hesitation. "And you're prepared to provide for her, to give her the life she deserves?" William nodded. "I've worked for nothing else this past year. Every day in those mines, every night under the stars, I thought only of coming back to Grace with enough to build a future worthy of her." Harold was silent for a long moment. Then, to Grace's astonishment, he extended his hand to William. "Then I give you my blessing. But know this, Ellsworth, if you ever cause my daughter a moment's unhappiness, there's nowhere on this earth you could hide from me." William clasped the offered hand firmly. "I understand, sir, and I promise you Grace's happiness will be my life's work." Harold nodded once, then turned to Grace. "Your mother would be proud of your constancy, daughter. Perhaps I should have remembered earlier how much you resemble her in spirit, not just in appearance." With that, he moved toward the door. "I'll inform Josephine that we have a guest for dinner. I imagine you two have much to discuss." As the door closed behind her father, Grace turned to William, scarcely able to believe he was truly standing before her. "You're really here," she whispered, reaching out to touch his face. "Not a dream, not a memory." William caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I've crossed mountains and deserts to return to you, Grace. Nothing could have kept me away." "Your letters," Grace said. "Father intercepted them. I never knew." "It doesn't matter now," William interrupted gently. "We're together again. That's all that matters." Grace reached beneath her high collar, drawing out the chain that held his mother's ring. "I've kept it close to my heart every day since you left." William took the ring, then knelt before her on one knee. "Grace Callaway, I left here a year ago with nothing but hope and determination. I return now with the means to offer you the life you deserve, but the greatest treasure I possess is your love. Will you marry me?" Grace's eyes filled with tears of joy as she extended her hand. "Yes, William. Today, tomorrow, always. Yes." As William slipped the ring onto her finger, the simple silver band with its turquoise stone meant more to Grace than any diamond could have. It represented everything they had endured to be together: separation, doubt, and ultimately, unwavering faith in their love. "When?" William asked as he rose to his feet, drawing her into his arms. "How soon can you be ready to return west with me as my wife?" "Tomorrow, if it were possible," Grace answered, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "But I suppose proper arrangements will take somewhat longer." William smiled, the same smile that had captivated her from the first. "I've waited this long to make you mine. I can wait a little longer to do things properly." As his lips met hers, Grace knew that every moment of doubt, every tear shed in loneliness, had been worth it for this moment of perfect joy. 3 weeks later, Grace stood before the mirror in her bedroom at Aunt Josephine's house, barely recognizing the elegant bride who gazed back at her. Her wedding dress, hastily commissioned from Boston's finest dressmaker, was a confection of ivory silk and delicate lace, far more sophisticated than anything she would have worn in Silver Creek. Martha, who had arrived from Montana 2 days earlier, fussed with the arrangement of orange blossoms in Grace's upswept hair. "Your mother would be so proud, seeing you today," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You look just like her on her wedding day." Grace smiled at the housekeeper's reflection. "I wish she could be here." "She is, child," Martha assured her, "in spirit if not in body." A soft knock at the door heralded Aunt Josephine's arrival. To everyone's surprise, the prim Bostonian had thrown herself wholeheartedly into wedding preparations once she'd met William and witnessed the obvious depth of feeling between the young couple. "It's time, dear," Josephine announced, her usual brisk tone softened by the occasion. "The carriage is waiting, and your father is pacing the hall like a caged lion." Grace turned from the mirror, taking a deep breath. "I'm ready." The small but elegant church was filled with a curious mixture of Boston society and the few ranch hands who had made the journey east with Harold. William stood at the altar, transformed from the weathered cowboy of Silver Creek into a polished gentleman in a perfectly tailored suit, though his tan and the strength in his shoulders still marked him as a man of the frontier. As Grace walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she saw only William, his face alight with love and pride. Harold placed her hand in William's with surprising gentleness, a silent acknowledgment that he was entrusting his most precious treasure to this man he had once dismissed. The ceremony was brief but deeply meaningful, each vow spoken with the weight of everything they had overcome to reach this moment. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, William's kiss held a promise of the lifetime they would build together. The reception at Josephine's home was a blend of Boston refinement and Western exuberance, with champagne flowing freely, and even Harold unbending enough to join in a traditional reel taught by one of the ranch hands. "When do you leave for Montana?" Charles Pembroke asked Grace during a momentary lull in the festivities. To his credit, he had accepted Grace's engagement with good grace, even attending the wedding as a gesture of goodwill. "The day after tomorrow," Grace replied. "William has business to conclude in Denver, and then we'll continue on to Silver Creek." "To your father's ranch?" Charles inquired politely. William, appearing at Grace's side, answered for her. "Actually, we've purchased land just south of Silver Creek. Prime grazing country that connects to a year-round stream. We'll be building our own place." "Bold," Charles commented, a hint of genuine admiration in his voice. "But then, I'd expect nothing less from the man who won Grace's heart. She was never meant for drawing rooms and tea parties, was she?" Grace smiled up at her husband. "No, indeed. My heart has always belonged to the wide open spaces and to the man who understands that about me." As Charles excused himself, William drew Grace into a quiet corner of the parlor. "Happy Mrs. Ellsworth?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. The new name sent a thrill through Grace. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she assured him. "Though I confess I'm eager for our journey west. Boston has been educational, but it's not home." "Home is wherever we're together," William said, pressing a discreet kiss to her temple. "But I understand. I've had my fill of city life as well." Harold approached them, champagne glass in hand. "I've been speaking with your husband about your new ranch, Grace," he said, the word husband still sounding strange on his lips when referring to William. "It seems he's made quite sound investments with his gold strike." William nodded. "I was fortunate to meet an honest banker in Denver who guided my decisions. The mine sale proceeds have been diversified land, cattle, and some conservative railroad investments." Harold looked impressed despite himself. "Wise. Many men who strike it rich in the gold fields are poor again within a year." "I had too much at stake to be careless with my good fortune," William said, his arm tightening around Grace's waist. "Everything I've done has been with an eye toward providing security for our future." Harold's expression softened. "I believe you, Ellsworth. Perhaps I judged you too hastily in the beginning." "You were protecting your daughter," William acknowledged. "I can't fault you for that, sir." "I'll be doing the same for our children someday." The mention of children brought a flush to Grace's cheeks and a gleam to Harold's eye. "Grandchildren," he mused. "I suppose I'm not too young to be a grandfather, though not too soon, mind you. Establish yourselves first." "We intend to," Grace assured him, though the look she exchanged with William held other promises. Later that night, in the privacy of the hotel suite William had reserved for the first days of their marriage, Grace discovered the full meaning of being a wife. William's touch, gentle yet sure, awakened sensations she had never imagined, binding them together in the most intimate expression of their love. Afterward, lying in her husband's arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Grace traced the outline of his face with her fingertips. "I still can't quite believe you're here, that we're truly married." William caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Believe it, my love. Nothing will ever separate us again." "Tell me about our ranch," Grace requested, nestling closer against his warmth. "I want to picture our home." William's voice was soft in the darkness as he painted a picture of their future. "The land sits in a protected valley with the mountains visible to the west. There's a natural clearing where the house will stand, with cottonwoods along the stream providing shade in summer. I've already contracted with builders to start construction before winter sets in." "What about the house itself?" Grace prompted, her imagination filling in the details as he spoke. "Solid construction, larger than most homestead cabins. 4 bedrooms," William paused, a smile in his voice. "I'm planning for the future. A proper kitchen for you, a study where I can manage the ranch business, and a wide porch wrapping around the front and side where we can watch the sunset together." "It sounds perfect," Grace sighed contentedly. "It will be," William assured her. "We'll build it together, just as we'll build our life together one day at a time. As sleep began to claim her, Grace made one final request. "Promise me something. Anything," William murmured against her hair. "Promise me we'll never take this for granted, what we have, what we fought for." William's arms tightened around her. "I promise. Every morning I wake beside you, I'll remember how close we came to losing this. Every night, I'll thank whatever Providence brought us together again." Satisfied, Grace drifted into sleep, secure in her husband's embrace and in the knowledge that their hard-won happiness was just the beginning of the life they would create together. The journey west was a honeymoon of sorts, though far from the European tours fashionable among Boston's elite. William and Grace traveled by train as far as the rails would take them, then continued by stagecoach through territories still wild enough to require armed guards. For Grace, each mile westward felt like shedding a layer of constraint. By the time they reached Denver, she had abandoned her restrictive Boston attire in favor of more practical clothing, much to William's appreciative amusement. "I much prefer you this way," he confessed as they rode side by side on the final leg of their journey, the vast Montana sky stretching endlessly above them. The Boston version of Grace Callaway was beautiful, but this Grace Ellsworth, free and natural, is the woman I fell in love with. Grace laughed, the sound carried away by the prairie wind. "I feel like myself again. I never could quite master the art of being a proper Boston lady." "Thank God for that," William replied with feeling. They crested a gentle rise, and suddenly the valley William had described came into view. The late afternoon sun gilded the landscape, highlighting the meandering stream with its border of trees and the open grassland beyond. In the distance, the foundations of their future home were visible, construction already underway. Grace reined her horse to a stop, taking in the vista with wonder. "It's even more beautiful than you described," she breathed. William dismounted, then helped Grace down from her saddle. Standing together on the hilltop, his arm around her waist, they surveyed what would soon be their domain. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ellsworth," William said softly. Grace turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. "Home," she repeated. "Not just a place, but wherever we're together." Their kiss sealed the moment, a promise and a celebration of everything they had overcome to reach this place of beginning. The first year on their new ranch was one of hard work and immeasurable joy. The house was completed before the first snow, a sturdy, welcoming structure that combined frontier practicality with touches of elegance Grace had brought from the East. William's careful investments yielded enough to stock the ranch with prime breeding cattle and hire a small but loyal crew of hands. Harold Callaway, to everyone's surprise, became a frequent visitor, his initial resistance to William transforming gradually into grudging respect and eventually into genuine affection. He brought wedding gifts, belatedly furniture for their home, breeding stock to improve their herd, and most precious of all, his blessing on their union. "You've proved me wrong, Ellsworth," he admitted one evening as they sat on the porch William had built just as promised. "You've given my daughter the life she deserves." William's gaze sought Grace through the window, where she moved about the kitchen preparing supper. "She's given me far more, sir, a purpose beyond myself, a reason to build something lasting." By their first anniversary, Grace had news that brought tears of joy to William's eyes. Their family would grow by one in the spring, a child conceived in love to carry forward their legacy. "A son to inherit the ranch someday," William mused as they lay together in their bedroom, his hand resting protectively over Grace's still flat stomach. "Or a daughter as stubborn as her mother," Grace countered with a smile. "Would you mind terribly if our firstborn is a girl?" William chuckled, pulling her closer. Mind, I'd consider myself the luckiest man alive to have two Grace Callaways in my life. As her pregnancy progressed, Grace bloomed with a radiance that took William's breath away. He found himself watching her at odd moments as she hung curtains in the nursery, as she wrote letters to Aunt Josephine describing their preparations, as she simply stood gazing out over their land with a contented smile. "What are you thinking?" he asked one such afternoon, finding her on the porch, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "I'm thinking about how differently things might have turned out," Grace admitted. "If you hadn't been so determined, if Father hadn't finally relented, if I'd given up hope during that year apart." William joined her, his arms sliding around her shoulders. "We were meant to find our way back to each other. I never doubted that, even in my darkest moments in the mines." "Were there many dark moments?" Grace asked softly. She had never pressed him for details about that year of separation, sensing there were hardships he preferred not to revisit. William was silent for a moment. "There were times when I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake, leaving you to chase what might have been an impossible dream. The work was backbreaking, the conditions dangerous. Men died in those mines, Grace, some from accidents, others from disease or the violence that follows where gold is found." Grace leaned into him, offering the comfort of her presence. "Yet you persevered." "I had you to return to," William said simply. "Every night I would take out your locket, look at your face, and remind myself why I was there. It gave me strength when mine faltered." "And now here we are," Grace said, guiding his hand to where their child kicked vigorously. "Building a life, creating a family." "Everything I ever wanted," William affirmed, "and more than I dared hope for." Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the pastures, wildflowers dotting the prairie, and on a clear April morning the birth of their son. After a labor that tested Grace's considerable strength and William's nerves, James Harold Ellsworth entered the world with a lusty cry that proclaimed his intention to be heard. William, allowed into the bedroom once the midwife had cleaned and swaddled the infant, found Grace propped against pillows, tired but triumphant, their son nestled in her arms. "He has your eyes," Grace said as William perched carefully on the edge of the bed, awestruck by the tiny person they had created. "And I think he'll have your determination as well. He certainly was in a hurry to arrive." William gently traced his son's perfect features with a calloused finger. "He's perfect. You're perfect. I never knew it was possible to love this much." "It expands, doesn't it?" Grace agreed softly. "The heart's capacity for love. I thought I couldn't possibly love you more than I did the day we married, yet each day proves me wrong." William bent to kiss her, pouring all the emotion he couldn't express in words into that tender gesture. "Rest now," he whispered against her lips. "You've done the miraculous today." As Grace drifted into exhausted sleep, William took his son into his arms and carried him to the window. The spring sunshine illuminated the ranch, their cattle grazing in the distance, the garden Grace had planted beginning to show green, the bunkhouse where their small crew lived, the barn and corrals that represented their livelihood. "This is your legacy, James," he whispered to the sleeping infant. "Built with love, perseverance, and the belief that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds." The years that followed brought prosperity to the Ellsworth ranch. William's business acumen, combined with Grace's practical insights, transformed their modest beginning into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Their family grew as well. James was joined by a sister, Margaret, named for Grace's mother, and later by another brother, Thomas. Through it all, William and Grace remained as deeply in love as they had been in those early days under the oak tree at the Callaway ranch. Their partnership, forged in separation and tested by adversity, only strengthened with time. On their 10th anniversary, William surprised Grace with a gift, a silver locket to replace the one she had given him before their year apart. "Open it," he urged as they sat together on their porch swing, the children already asleep inside. Grace complied, finding inside not a portrait but a pressed flower, a prairie rose, its delicate petals preserved between the silver halves of the locket. "You remember?" William asked. Grace's eyes filled with tears as the memory surfaced. "From the day we first met. You were mending fence on the north pasture, and I had ridden out against Father's wishes. You picked this flower and offered it to me, saying even the wildest prairie produces beauty for those who know where to look." William nodded, pleased that she remembered. "I knew then, though I scarcely dared admit it even to myself, that you were the woman I would love all my life." Grace leaned against his shoulder, the locket clutched in her hand. "And have you loved me all this time, through the difficult days as well as the joyful ones?" William's answer was both simple and profound. "Every heartbeat, Grace, every breath. Loving you isn't something I do, it's who I am." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching darkness settle over the land they had made their own. Their journey had not been easy, but as William had once promised, they had built their life together, one day at a time, each challenge faced hand in hand, each joy multiplied by sharing. In the quiet of the gathering dusk, with the woman he adored beside him and the home they had created surrounding them, William Ellsworth knew with absolute certainty that every hardship endured, every obstacle overcome, had been worth it for this, the enduring happiness of a love that had conquered distance, disapproval, and doubt to flourish under the vast Montana sky. Grace, watching the first stars appear overhead, felt the same certainty. Her father had been wrong all those years ago. William hadn't been a fortune-hunting drifter, but a man of vision and integrity who had risked everything to prove himself worthy of her love. In doing so, he had given her not just security and comfort, but a partnership of equals, a family bound by love, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. As the evening deepened into night, they moved inside, checking on their sleeping children before retiring to the bedroom that had witnessed both passionate embraces and quiet conversations, the shared dreams and occasional disagreements that made up a marriage. "You ever regret it?" William asked as they lay together in the darkness, his voice barely above a whisper. "Choosing this life with me over the comforts and society of Boston," Grace's answer came without hesitation. "Not for a single moment. This is where I belong, William. With you, with our children on this land we've made our own. This is the life I was meant to live." William's arms tightened around her, a wordless acknowledgement of the gift she had given him, her unwavering faith, her steadfast love, her willingness to wait when others would have given up hope. "I love you, Grace Ellsworth," he murmured against her hair. "Today, tomorrow, always." "And I love you," she replied, the simple words carrying the weight of their shared history and the promise of all the years to come. "With all that I am, with all that I will ever be." Their lips met in the darkness, sealing once more the vows they had made not just before God and witnesses on their wedding day, but in their hearts from the moment they had first recognized in each other the missing piece of themselves, the love worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth crossing mountains and deserts to claim. In each other's arms, they found the peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be, with exactly the person you are meant to love. And in that knowledge, in that perfect belonging, they found the greatest treasure of all, a love that had not just endured, but flourished, growing stronger and deeper with each passing day of their shared life under the endless Montana sky.